If you'd told me that my son's wedding would mark the beginning of my own undoing, I would have laughed in your face. That day, the church smelled of white lilies and hope. The pews were packed. And everyone kept saying how lucky I was to gain a daughter. But deep down, something in me tightened like a thread pulled too hard. I just didn't know yet that it was the start of everything unraveling. My name's Margaret Evans. I'm 60 years old, and I've lived my whole life in a quiet Midwestern town where people still wave at each other from their porches and gossip travels faster than the wind. I raised my son Daniel here in the same two-story house my late husband Henry and I built with our own hands. Henry passed away 8 years ago, and since then, that house has been my world. Every photo on the mantel, every squeaky floorboard, they hold decades of memories. Daniel met Lauren about 2 years after Henry died. She was everything I thought he needed: smart, charming, and always dressed like she had somewhere better to be. She came from the city, said she wanted a quiet life, and I remember thinking how lovely it was that she found peace here in our town. But I didn't see the way her eyes lingered on my house, on the little details: the antique clock Henry restored, the silverware set from my grandmother, even the framed deed to the lake cabin we inherited. It wasn't admiration, it was calculation. At first, she played the perfect daughter-in-law. She'd drop by with pastries, sit at the kitchen table, and ask me about my life with Henry. She called me Mom after only a few weeks. She made me feel like family again. And after years of loneliness, that meant the world. But slowly, she started changing the tone. "Mom," she'd say with that sugary smile, "you shouldn't be living alone in a house this big. Daniel worries about you, you know." I'd brush it off, telling her I liked my independence. But she kept pushing. "You could just transfer the property title, make things simpler if something happens to you." That word transfer, it stuck in my mind like a thorn. I wasn't ready to admit it then. But Lauren didn't marry my son for love. She married him for what he'd eventually inherit. Daniel, bless his heart, has always been trusting, too trusting. He believed every word she said. When she started whispering that I was getting forgetful, he listened. When she suggested that maybe I needed help managing finances, he nodded. The first time I noticed something was off, it was small. A bill that went unpaid. A check I swore I mailed. Gone missing. I thought maybe I was slipping. But then Lauren started offering to organize my paperwork. That's when alarm bells rang. One afternoon, she brought over herbal tea, said it would help me sleep better. The next morning, I woke up dizzy, disoriented, and with a pounding headache. She laughed it off, said it must have been the change in weather. But I've lived in this town my whole life. I know when something's wrong. Still, I wanted to believe she cared. You see, when you're alone as long as I was, you cling to kindness, even when it's fake. But fake kindness can be deadly. A few weeks later, I overheard a conversation that froze my blood. Daniel and Lauren were in the living room. They thought I was asleep upstairs. Lauren said, "Once we get the paperwork through, we'll finally have the cabin too." This marriage was the best investment I ever made. My heart dropped. I sat in the dark hallway, hands shaking. I wanted to scream, to storm downstairs, but I didn't. I just sat there, silent, because that's when I realized this wasn't just greed. It was a plan. She'd been laying the groundwork for months, convincing Daniel I was losing my mind, slipping little comments to our neighbors about how I forgot names or misplaced things, making me doubt myself. I later learned she even visited a lawyer without me to ask how to declare someone legally incompetent. The next day, she tried to get me to sign something, a simple financial authorization, she called it. When I asked what it was for, she smiled that tight smile of hers and said, "Just to make paying your bills easier." I didn't sign. That's when her tone changed. The warmth vanished. The next time she came over, she didn't bring pastries. She brought tension. Every sentence had a blade hidden in it. You know, Margaret, sometimes people don't realize when it's time to step aside. It's sad, really. I remember staring into her eyes, and for the first time, I saw her clearly cold, calculating, dangerous. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the streetlights, wondering how my life had come to this. I had worked 40 years as a financial clerk. I'd buried a husband, raised a son, paid off a house, and now I was being treated like a burden, a prize waiting to be claimed. I promised myself something that night. I may be old, but I'm not weak. I won't let her take what Henry and I built. Little did I know, Lauren wasn't done. She was only getting started. Because when manipulation failed, she turned to something far darker. And that's where the real nightmare began. People always say evil shows itself in big ways, shouting, violence, chaos. But in my experience, it comes quietly. It smiles. It asks if you'd like another cup of tea. That's how it was with Lauren. After I refused to sign that so-called financial form, her attitude changed overnight. She stopped pretending. The charm drained from her voice, and every visit became an inspection, her eyes darting around my house as if she was already deciding where her furniture would go once I was gone. She'd say things like, "Mom, the place is really too much for you. Maybe you should move into assisted living before something bad happens." I'd reply, "Lauren, I've managed just fine for 60 years. She'd laugh, but there was no humor in it. "For now, Margaret, for now." One evening, she came over with another thermos of her relaxing herbal tea. She poured it into my favorite porcelain cup and watched closely as I took a sip. I remember the taste bitter, earthy, metallic, not at all like chamomile. Within 10 minutes, the room started spinning. My vision blurred, my heartbeat slowed, and my head felt heavy, like someone had wrapped it in cotton. Lauren's face blurred into soft colors. I remember her saying, "You really should rest more, Mom. You're not yourself lately." Her words echoed like I was underwater. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was pouring through the curtains. I had no memory of going to bed. My phone was on the kitchen counter, open to my bank app. Someone had tried to log in. The attempt failed, but I knew it wasn't me. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. I knew something was happening, something dangerous. I started keeping notes every time I felt dizzy, every suspicious smell or strange behavior. I stopped drinking anything Lauren brought me, but she was clever. She knew how to make me look like the unstable one. She'd tell Daniel, "Your mom's memory is getting worse." Or, "She accused me of poisoning her tea. Can you believe that?" And Daniel, God, it hurts even now to think about it. He believed her. One night, he came over alone. "Mom," he said, "I think you need help." Lauren's worried. "Maybe we should talk to a doctor." I looked at my son, my only son, and saw a stranger. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired, like he'd already decided I was losing my mind. I said, "Daniel, she's trying to take everything from us." He sighed. "Mom, please. She loves you." That was when I realized I couldn't count on him anymore. The next few days were a blur of exhaustion. I'd find things misplaced, jewelry gone from my dresser, documents out of order. Lauren started visiting even when Daniel wasn't around, always smiling, always offering tea. And then came the birthday party, Daniel's 35th. Lauren threw it at their house and insisted I come. I didn't want to, but staying away would have looked suspicious. Halfway through the evening, as guests laughed and music played, I went to the kitchen for some water. That's when I heard her voice, Lauren's voice, just around the corner, laughing with a friend. She said, "Oh, please, this marriage was the best investment I ever made. Once we get the house and the lake cabin, we'll be set." She's basically handing it all over. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile. The sound made her jump. She turned and saw me standing there, frozen, pale, trembling. "Margaret," she said smoothly, I was just joking. But her eyes said otherwise. I left early that night. I didn't even say goodbye. When I got home, I locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat in silence. That's when I decided I needed proof, something no one could deny. The next morning, I called a lawyer, a woman named Olivia Reed. She'd helped one of my neighbors with an inheritance dispute, and I remembered her being sharp, confident, and kind. When I told her everything, the tea, the lies, the overheard conversation, she didn't call me paranoid. She leaned forward and said, "Margaret, if what you're saying is true, we're dealing with attempted fraud and possibly something much worse, but we'll need evidence." Olivia's calm gave me strength. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't crazy. She helped me buy a set of hidden cameras, the kind you can connect to the cloud for live streaming. We placed one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and another near the back door. She also told me to start recording conversations on my phone. "Don't confront her yet," she warned. "Let her think she's winning." That was easier said than done. Every visit felt like a performance. Lauren would sit across from me, smiling, pretending to care, while I forced myself to act naive, to pour her tea, to ask about Daniel's job, to pretend nothing was wrong. But inside, I was documenting every second. Then, one morning, I noticed something strange. The sugar in my jar looked clumpy, like it had gotten wet. When I stirred it into my coffee, the crystals didn't dissolve properly. I remembered Olivia's words and stopped before drinking it. Later that day, I took a sample to a friend's daughter. She's a lab technician at the local clinic. She called me that evening. "Margaret," she said, "I don't know what you're dealing with, but that sugar isn't sugar. It's laced with tranquilizers. Tranquilizers. The kind that can cause memory loss, confusion, even mimic early dementia symptoms." I sat there, holding the phone, my hands trembling. It all made sense, the dizziness, the blackouts, Daniel thinking I was losing it. Lauren hadn't just been trying to take my house. She was trying to erase me. That night, I called Olivia again. She said, "It's time we make a move." So we set the trap. I pretended to leave town. Told Daniel I needed a few days at the cabin to clear my head. In reality, I stayed in a nearby motel, watching my own house through live footage from the hidden cameras. And what I saw next confirmed everything. It's strange, the night before we set the trap, I didn't feel fear. I felt calm. The kind of calm you get when you've already lived through the worst and nothing can shock you anymore. I remember sitting on the edge of that stiff motel bed, watching my house through my phone screen. The live feed showed my quiet living room, same floral curtains, same old clock ticking like nothing had changed. But everything had. Olivia was right. Sometimes the best way to expose a lie is to let it breathe. I told Daniel I was heading to the lake cabin for the week, that I needed space. He sounded relieved. "Good," he said. "Lauren and I will check in on the house for you." The irony nearly made me laugh. So I waited. For 2 days, nothing happened. Lauren's car didn't show up. I almost started to doubt myself. Maybe she'd sensed something. Then, at 4:53 a.m., on the third morning, movement flickered across the screen. There she was. Lauren. She was wearing dark jeans, a jacket, her hair tied back, the look of someone who didn't want to be seen. 2 men followed behind her, both wearing work gloves and carrying moving boxes. She looked confident, like someone walking into her own home. She took out a key, tried the door, then realized it was locked. Her frustration flashed across her face. She whispered something to one of the men. He pulled out a crowbar. I could barely breathe. Olivia was already awake. She told me to call her the moment anything happened. I dialed. "She's there," I whispered. "Stay calm," Olivia said. "Keep the stream rolling. Don't call the police yet. We need her to incriminate herself." Through the hidden cameras, I watched them force the door open. The sound of wood splintering made my stomach turn. My home, the place Henry and I built together, being invaded like it was nothing. Lauren walked straight into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the counters. She turned to one of the men and said, "Start packing everything. Furniture, jewelry, documents, all of it. She's not coming back." Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. I turned the volume up. "Yeah, it's done," she said to whoever was on the other end. "She's gone. I'll handle the paperwork later. I told Daniel she's losing it once the doctor signs off. We can sell the property under guardianship." Guardianship. There it was, her final move. I looked at the feed, at her standing in my kitchen, and something inside me broke. But not with sadness, with clarity. I texted Olivia, "Now." She replied, "Recording everything. I'm calling law enforcement." Minutes felt like hours. I watched Lauren go through my drawers, pulling out my jewelry box, counting the pieces. She even laughed when she found the envelope of old savings bonds Henry and I kept for Daniel's future. "Guess it's my future now," she said. Then her phone rang again. She picked up and said, "He's still asleep. Once the lawyer files, it's official. We'll sell the lake cabin first. It's easier to move." Every word was being streamed, recorded, and backed up to the cloud. Finally, at 5:22 a.m., I saw flashing lights through the front camera. 2 police cars pulled up quietly. Officers surrounded the house. One of them, Sergeant Miles, nodded at the camera. Olivia must have coordinated with him. They moved in fast. Lauren didn't even have time to react. One of the officers shouted, "Police, drop everything!" The 2 men froze. Lauren turned, eyes wide. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. When they cuffed her, she tried to talk her way out of it. "This is a misunderstanding. This is my mother-in-law's house. She asked me to take care of it." But the officers had already seen the footage, the forced entry, the recorded confession. I wish I could say I felt triumphant watching her get arrested, but all I felt was exhaustion. Hours later, I met Olivia at the station. She looked at me with that steady lawyer's calm and said, "Margaret, you did everything right. We have her confession, the footage, the poisoning evidence. This case is airtight." When the officers brought in the bag of evidence, my sugar jar, the bottles from Lauren's car trunk labeled with medical tranquilizers, my knees nearly gave out. She really had been trying to destroy me. Daniel arrived an hour later. His face was pale, his hair a mess. "Mom, what's going on?" Olivia looked at him calmly. "Your wife's been arrested, Mr. Evans. We have evidence she attempted to poison your mother and commit fraud." He stared at me, shaking his head. "That can't be true. I didn't say anything." I just looked at him, my son, the boy I raised, now realizing that the woman he loved was the reason his mother nearly died. When he finally spoke again, his voice cracked. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I wanted to forgive him right then. But forgiveness takes time." Olivia walked me to her car afterward. The sunrise was breaking soft orange light spilling across the parking lot. She said, "You know, Margaret, most people in your position would have been too afraid to fight back." I smiled faintly. "Maybe. But I learned something a long time ago, Olivia. When you've lost as much as I have, you stop being afraid of losing more." That morning, I went back to my house. The door was broken, the drawers ransacked, but it was still mine. I brewed myself a fresh pot of coffee, real coffee, no tea, no sugar, and sat by the window where Henry used to read the paper. And for the first time in months, the house felt safe again. But I knew this wasn't over yet. There would be court hearings, testimony, endless explanations. Justice may be slow, but it was coming. And I was ready to face it all, one truth at a time. The day of the trial, the courthouse smelled like old wood and fear. Even though I wasn't the one on trial, my palms were slick with sweat. I sat in the front row beside Olivia, clutching my purse like it could protect me from the memories that wouldn't stop playing in my mind. The poisoned tea, the broken door, the look on my son's face. When the truth finally shattered his world. Across the room sat Lauren, in a gray suit that was 2 sizes too big, her wrists still red from the cuffs. She didn't look like the confident woman who used to stroll through my kitchen giving orders. She looked small, cornered. Still, when our eyes met, she smirked, just barely. That smirk told me she still thought she could talk her way out of this. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then it began. The prosecutor laid everything out, piece by piece, the recordings, the live stream footage, the toxicology report on the sugar, every detail cut through the air like glass. When they played the clip of her phone call, the one where she said, "This marriage was the best investment I ever made," I heard gasps ripple through the courtroom. Even the bailiff looked disgusted. Lauren's lawyer tried to spin it. He claimed she was under stress, that it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just helping her mother-in-law organize her estate. But the evidence was a mountain he couldn't climb. Then came Daniel's turn to testify. I hadn't seen him much since the arrest, maybe twice, both times awkward, quiet, heavy. When he walked to the stand, he looked like a ghost of himself. He spoke softly, eyes down. "I thought she loved me," he said. "I believed every word she said about Mom. She told me Mom was losing her mind." His voice cracked. I should have known better. I wanted to reach out to tell him it wasn't all his fault, but I couldn't move. The guilt in his voice already did what no punishment could. It broke him from the inside. When my turn came, I stood slowly, my knees aching, heart pounding. The prosecutor asked, "Mrs. Evans, in your own words, what did this experience do to you?" I looked at the jury, 12 strangers staring back with pity and anger, and I told them the truth. "It made me doubt myself," I said. "It made me believe I was losing my mind. I trusted her. I wanted to think she loved my son, loved our family, but she didn't. She saw me as an obstacle, something to get rid of." I paused, my voice shaking. "I'm not a rich woman. Everything I have, I worked for. My husband and I built our home with our own hands. She tried to take not just my money, but my dignity." When I sat down, Olivia gave my hand a small squeeze. "You did great," she whispered. After 3 long days, the verdict came. The jury found Lauren Tiara Evans guilty on all major counts: attempted fraud, forgery, vandalism, theft, and conspiracy to poison. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in state prison, no parole for the first 5. The courtroom was silent. Then, as they led her away, she looked over her shoulder at me one last time. There was no remorse in her eyes, only hate. But I didn't look away. I wanted her to know that no amount of poison, lies, or greed could destroy me. Outside, the air was cold and clean. Reporters tried to ask questions, but I just kept walking. Olivia handled them. All I wanted was to go home. That night, Daniel came by. He didn't knock at first, just stood on the porch, staring at the door. When I opened it, he burst into tears. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said. "I was blind. I let her do this to you. I didn't protect you." I hadn't seen him cry since he was a little boy, scraped knees, broken toys, the kind of pain you could fix with a hug. But this pain was different. I put my hand on his shoulder. "You were deceived, Daniel. Don't carry her sins as your own." He nodded, but his eyes were full of guilt. "I called the cabin contractor," he said quietly. "I'm selling it. You should have peace, not memories of all this." We sat together in silence, the house creaking softly around us. It felt like we were both trying to remember how to be mother and son again. The next few months were a blur of paperwork, insurance claims, property records, endless legal documents. Olivia helped me every step of the way. When it was finally done, she handed me a folder and said, "You're free, Margaret. It's over." But freedom, I've learned, doesn't come with a piece of paper. It comes slowly, one morning at a time. I sold the old house not long after, Too many shadows lingered there. The broken door frame, the stains on the carpet, the memories I couldn't wash away. With the money, I bought a small cottage closer to town, bright white siding, big front porch, flower beds full of tulips, the kind of place Henry would have loved. I also opened small financial consulting service with two of my friends from church, helping other seniors manage their money safely. It felt good to use what I knew to protect people like me. And for the first time in years, I started living again. Some mornings I still wake up expecting to hear Henry's voice or Daniel's laughter echoing from the kitchen. But instead, it's quiet, peaceful quiet, not the fearful kind. People in town sometimes stop me at the market and say, "Margaret, you were so brave. I don't know how you did it." I just smile. Because bravery isn't loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to sign the wrong paper, refusing to drink the wrong tea, refusing to give up when everyone says you're crazy. The trial gave me justice, but standing my ground that gave me myself back. Justice was supposed to feel like relief. But when the gavel came down and Lauren was taken away, I didn't feel peace, just a strange emptiness. Like when a storm finally passes and all that's left is debris you still have to clean up. For weeks, I moved through my days in silence. I'd stand at the sink, washing a cup that wasn't dirty, staring out the window at the empty street. No cars in the driveway, no voices in the house, just me. Freedom can feel a lot like loneliness. Daniel tried to visit often after the trial, but I could see how hard it was for him. Every time he looked at me, there was that flicker of shame in his eyes, like he was still asking for forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. One afternoon, I found him sitting on my porch steps, staring at the gravel. He looked thinner, older somehow. "I drove past the courthouse today," he said quietly. "They moved her out of the county jail. I didn't say anything, I just waited." He took a deep breath. "I know you don't owe me anything, Mom, but I need to know, will you ever forgive me?" The truth is, I didn't know how to answer. I'd spent months being gaslit, poisoned, called delusional, and he, my own son, had believed it. I wanted to tell him that forgiveness was easy, but it wasn't. It was work, painful, exhausting work. So I said, "Daniel, forgiveness isn't about saying it's okay. It's about deciding to stop carrying what someone else did." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "I wish I'd listened sooner." I nodded. "Me too, but we can start listening now." We sat there together, the sun setting behind the trees, and for the first time since everything happened, I felt the smallest sense of peace between us. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was something. After that, I started letting life back in, little by little. I joined a local support group for seniors who'd been victims of scams and financial abuse. You wouldn't believe how many people had stories just like mine. Children tricked, assets stolen, families torn apart by greed. Sitting in that church basement, listening to them, I realized I wasn't alone. One woman, Judith, said something that stuck with me. "They can take your money, your things, your peace of mind, but the day you start talking about it, you take your power back." That became my mantra. So I started sharing my story, quietly at first, in small gatherings, at church events, then later in community workshops. Olivia even encouraged me to write about it for a local paper. The article was called "When Trust Turns Toxic: How I Fought Back." People wrote letters. Strangers thanked me for speaking up. A few even came forward with their own stories of manipulation and betrayal. It was heartbreaking, but it also healed something in me, because silence is where abusers thrive. And I wasn't going to be silent anymore. Still, some nights the memories came back. The taste of that bitter tea, the dizziness, the way Lauren's voice used to sound so sweet when she called me Mom. Those memories don't fade, they just get quieter. One night, I couldn't sleep. I got up, made myself a cup of hot cocoa, and sat on the porch. The air was crisp, the stars sharp and clear. That's when I realized something simple but profound. I didn't want revenge anymore. I just wanted my life back. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery. Henry's grave sits under a maple tree that turns gold every fall. I brought fresh flowers, yellow chrysanthemums, his favorite, and sat beside the stone. "I think you'd be proud of me," I said softly. I stood my ground. I told him everything: the trial, Daniel's apologies, even the consulting business. Talking to that headstone made me feel like I was closing a chapter. When I got back home, I found Daniel waiting again, this time holding a folder. "Mom," he said, "I signed the paperwork. The lake cabin is officially in your name alone. No joint ownership. I should have done this years ago." I opened the folder, looked at the document, and felt something lift inside me. Not just relief restoration. He was finally taking responsibility, not out of guilt, but out of love. I hugged him. Not the polite kind of hug, a real one. The kind where forgiveness passes wordlessly between two people who've both been hurt and healed. From then on, Daniel started spending weekends helping me at the office. He'd fix coffee, file papers, talk to clients. Sometimes we'd laugh like old times. Once, he said, "You know, Mom, I think Dad would have liked seeing you like this helping people." And I said, "He always believed in building something that lasts." I guess this is my version of that. I won't lie, there are still scars. Every time the phone rings late at night, a part of me tenses. Every time someone offers me a drink, I didn't pour myself. I hesitate, but I'm learning to live with it, to trust carefully again. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a daily decision, a choice to move forward, even when the past tries to drag you back. And sometimes, the people we need to forgive most aren't the ones who betrayed us. It's ourselves, for not seeing it sooner, for loving too blindly, for believing that family could never hurt you. But forgiveness isn't weakness. It's how you reclaim your strength. And I was done being anyone's victim. I used to think life ended after 60, that once the betrayals, losses, and heartbreaks came, all that was left was surviving. But I was wrong. Life doesn't end, it changes shape. It slows down just enough for you to see what truly matters. It had been 8 months since the trial when I finally decided to sell the old house. That place, once my safe haven, had become a museum of ghosts, every room still echoing with Lauren's lies, every corner reminding me of what I almost lost. Daniel tried to talk me out of it at first. "Mom, this house, it's where I grew up," he said softly, his hand brushing the banister. "I know," I told him. "But it's also where I nearly lost myself. I can't live surrounded by memories that only look backward. So I sold it not to escape, but to start fresh." The day I handed over the keys, I stood on the porch and watched as the moving truck pulled away. My reflection shimmered faintly in the window, older, wiser, a few more wrinkles maybe, but a woman who had survived something fierce. I bought a smaller place, a single-story cottage just outside town, with a white picket fence and a tiny garden out front. The neighbors were kind. The kind of people who waved when you drove by and left pies on your porch just because. For the first time in years, I felt safe. One morning, while unpacking boxes, I found a photo, me, Henry, and Daniel at Lake Monroe. We were laughing, Daniel holding a tiny fish he'd caught. I ran my fingers over the image and smiled. "I think we'll be okay," I whispered. The weeks passed quietly. I started hosting weekly tea gatherings for women from the community: widows, retirees, mothers with grown kids. We'd talk, laugh, and sometimes cry. There was healing in those afternoons, in knowing that everyone had a story they were trying to make peace with. Olivia, my lawyer and now close friend, came by often. One afternoon, she leaned back on my porch swing, sipping lemonade. "You know, Margaret," she said, "you have a gift for making people feel safe. Have you ever thought of doing something with that?" I laughed. "Like what? Becoming a therapist at 60? Maybe not that," she said, smiling. "But what about a consulting service, helping older folks protect their finances, avoid scams, set up their wills properly? You've lived it. You understand the fear." The idea planted itself in my mind like a seed. That night, I sat at my desk and started sketching ideas. A month later, Silver Shield Consulting was born, a small firm dedicated to helping seniors protect their independence. Daniel helped set up the website. Olivia handled the legal paperwork. And me? I became the face of it, the woman who once lost everything, now teaching others how not to. Our first client was a retired teacher who'd nearly signed over her savings to a man pretending to be her grandson. I sat with her for hours, explaining every document, reassuring her that she still had control. When she hugged me after, I felt something deep inside me shift. This was what healing looked like. Word spread quickly in our small Midwestern town. Before long, I was giving talks at libraries and senior centers, sharing my story under the title, "How I Took My Power Back." Each time I spoke, I'd see faces in the crowd, eyes that widened with recognition, hands that trembled when I mentioned betrayal by family. I'd remind them, "You're not weak for trusting. You're human." But the moment you stand up and say, "No more," that's when you become powerful. Daniel started joining me at those talks, quietly sitting in the back. Sometimes afterward, he'd shake my hand like any other guest, pride flickering across his face. I think, in his own way, he was healing too. One night after an event, he said, "You know, Mom, I used to think you were fragile, but you're the strongest person I know." I smiled. "Strength doesn't mean you never break, sweetheart. It means you learn how to rebuild." The business grew. I hired 2 part-timers, women who'd also gone through betrayal. We made a team fierce, determined, protective. Olivia joked that we were the Avengers of the over 50 crowd. It wasn't about money. It was about reclaiming dignity. One Friday, after closing the office, I drove out to the lake, the same one where that old family photo was taken. The air was warm, the water still. I sat on the dock, kicked off my shoes, and let my feet dangle in the water. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about the past or the pain, just the peace. I thought of Lauren not with anger, but with a strange, distant pity. She had chosen greed over love, deception over connection. She'd lost everything that mattered long before the court did it for her. Me? I'd lost a lot too, but I'd found something she never had: self-respect and the courage to live honestly. That night, as I drove home, the radio played an old song Henry used to hum, "You Are My Sunshine." I smiled through tears, humming along. Grief and joy coexisted now, like 2 old friends learning to share the same space. I'd been poisoned, betrayed, almost erased, but I was still here, and for the first time in years, that was enough. If someone had told me 3 years ago that all of this, the poison, the betrayal, the courtrooms, the heartbreak, would lead me to peace, I would have laughed. But peace doesn't always arrive in silence or safety. Sometimes it comes after surviving the storm and realizing you're still standing. It was a clear spring morning when I finally visited the courthouse again. Not for a trial this time, but to speak at a community awareness event about elder financial abuse. Walking into that same building where my world once collapsed, I felt calm. The air didn't feel heavy anymore. The walls didn't whisper old fears. I was no longer a victim walking into court. I was a survivor, walking back on her own terms. The event coordinator, a young woman from the Attorney General's office, introduced me warmly. "This is Margaret Hale," she said. Her story helped inspire changes to how our state handles elder guardianship petitions. People applauded softly, respectfully, and I stepped to the microphone. I looked out at the crowd. Families, seniors, students, even a few police officers. Faces I didn't know, but whose hearts I could feel. I began with what I always said. In that calm, even tone I'd learned from telling my story too many times to count. My name is Margaret Hale. I'm 61 years old, and I'm here today because I refuse to let someone else write the ending to my story. There was a ripple of stillness in the room, so I kept going. I trusted the wrong person, someone who married into my family not for love, but for money. She almost destroyed me. But I learned something along the way. The most dangerous thing isn't losing your wealth, it's losing your voice. I could see heads nodding. One woman dabbed her eyes. So if anyone here has ever been told they're too old, too naive, or too dependent, I want you to remember this. You still matter. Your story matters. And you have the right to fight for yourself, even when no one believes you. When I stepped down, people stood. I didn't expect it. The applause rolled through the courtroom like a wave. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't in years purpose. Afterward, a young reporter approached me. "Miss Hale," she asked, "if you could say one thing to your younger self before all this, what would it be?" I smiled softly. I'd tell her not to confuse kindness with weakness. You can be gentle and still stand your ground. A few weeks later, life gave me one more full circle moment. Daniel came over with his wife, not Lauren, of course, but someone new. Her name was Jenna, a nurse from the next town over. She had kind eyes and the kind of quiet warmth that filled a room without trying. We had dinner, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, the same meal Henry used to make on Sundays. Daniel kept glancing around, smiling nervously. "Mom," he said, "finally, I wanted you to be the first to know Jenna's pregnant." I froze for a second, and then the tears just came. Not sad ones, soft, grateful ones. "A grandmother," I whispered. "Henry would have loved this." Daniel took my hand. "I want our child to know you, Mom. To know what strength looks like." That night, after they left, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, my own tea this time, safe and simple, and watched the moon rise. The house felt alive again. For so long, I thought survival was about fighting, staying alert, staying guarded. But real survival, I've learned, is about allowing joy back in, letting yourself breathe without fear, trusting again carefully but openly. A few months later, I was at the lake cabin, my sanctuary. The sun was setting orange, melting into gold, and I could hear the faint laughter of children from a nearby dock. I opened my journal, the one I'd kept since everything began, and started writing the final entry. "Dear Henry, you were right. Love doesn't disappear when people fail you. It just changes shape. Sometimes it becomes self-respect. Sometimes it becomes forgiveness. And sometimes it becomes the courage to start again. I thought I lost everything, but maybe I was being rebuilt all along." I closed the journal and set it down beside me. The water lapped quietly against the wood, the breeze carrying the scent of pine. I whispered into the evening air, "I'm okay now." And for the first time, I truly was. When the first snow came that winter, I hung a new sign outside my office. "Silver Shield Consulting, protect what you've built. Believe in what you deserve." The business had grown not large, but steady. Each client who walked through my door carried their own story of trust, loss, or fear. And every time I helped one of them find their strength again, I felt that same spark inside me, the quiet power of purpose. One morning, as I was tidying up the office, the phone rang. It was Olivia. "Margaret," she said, "did you see the paper?" I hadn't. She laughed softly. "There's a new article about you, from victim to advocate. One woman's stand inspires change. You're a local hero now." I chuckled. Hero might be a stretch. Not to the people you've helped, she said. I hung up and sat for a moment in silence. I thought of the woman I used to be, trembling, dizzy, doubting her own mind and how far I'd come. Justice wasn't just about courtrooms or verdicts. It was about reclaiming the life that someone tried to steal and living it louder than ever. That night, I recorded one final message for the group's website, my story in my own voice, for others to hear. If you're listening to this, I said softly, and you've ever felt betrayed by someone you love, I want you to know something. You're not broken. You're just being asked to rebuild. And sometimes, that rebuilding, that choosing to live again, is the bravest act of all. I paused, letting the silence breathe, the sound of my own heartbeat steady and calm. Don't let the world make you bitter, I continued. Let it make you wise. Because at the end of the day, love the real kind always wins, even if it takes time. I clicked off the recorder. Outside, snowflakes danced in the porch light, soft and slow. And just like that, my story, the one that began in betrayal, ended in peace. Before you judge someone's silence, remember they might be surviving a storm you can't see. Margaret's story isn't about revenge. It's about rising again, stronger, wiser, free. Forgiveness isn't surrender. It's how you take your life back. If this story touched your heart, hit subscribe, because sometimes the stories we tell remind us that even in the deepest hurt, love can find its way home. Thank you for watching.